Today, I have signed a world-leading migration partnership with Rwanda.
The global approach to asylum and migration is broken.
When I first heard about the British government's plan to relocate new refugees to Rwanda, I was puzzled. I could not understand how does sending to another country refugees fulfill the United Kingdom's own commitment to provide protection to those in need. I want to show how the United Kingdom's own judiciary, officials and, yes, government-owned pages and report put into question some of the claims their own politicians have been making. On the 14th of April, in the capital of Rwanda, Kigali, the Home Secretary of the UK, Priti Patel, in front of a small crowd of journalists, announced a radical change to the United Kingdom's processing of asylum seekers. The change we are focusing on is part of the Nationality and Borders Act, which in itself covers several other controversial points. Put simply, the UK-Rwanda Partnership scheme will focus on single men crossing the Channel requesting protection to authorities, which instead of being protected in the United Kingdom, will be essentially deported to Rwanda. The United Kingdom will also be paying £120 million to Rwanda in order to host its refugees, plus additional funding in the future to host its asylum operations. But how did we get to this point? Amongst other countries, the United Kingdom has also seen a steady rise in asylum seekers, with a sharp increase in 2021. When over 48,000 individuals applies to the country for protection. To put things into perspective, the total asylum caseload has doubled in size since 2014. As of June 2021, the total work-in-progress asylum caseload consisted of 125,000 cases, of which almost half are still waiting for an initial decision. This has put great pressure on the system. It is therefore clear that there is a growing problem as to how the country can remain compliant with the obligation it has in international law towards asylum seekers. But why does the United Kingdom have an obligation towards these people? The UK is one of the signatories of the 1951 Refugee Convention, meaning it has by law committed to protect refugees and ensure their rights are protected. In particular, based on Article 31 of the Convention, the United Kingdom has committed not to impose penalties on refugees coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom is threatened. Given the increased pressure on the asylum system and confronted with the need to take action to improve the way the system handles this issue, the government has chosen to essentially pass part of the responsibilities it accepted to take over 70 years ago to a different country. But where is it exactly that we are sending these refugees to? One of the first ideas tabled was to send the refugees to Albania. However, the Home Secretary did not get what I'd call a positive response from the country. Albania's foreign minister said Albania will proudly host 4,000 Afghan refugees based on its goodwill, but will never be a hub of anti-immigration policies of bigger and richer countries. And to drive the point home, the spokesman for the Albanian Prime Minister said, "We cannot fulfill the duty of those who are bigger than us and are more wealthy than us." But this did not deter our government, which started to look more to the south.
And today, our approach as two outward-looking countries has led to the signing of a new international partnership, which is a world first. It is a migration and economic development partnership with the country of Rwanda and the UK.
Many people will know Rwanda because of the tragic events that took place in the country now almost 30 years ago. However, it would be unfair to characterize the Rwanda of 2022 like this. The country has seen massive change and its situation has improved dramatically since. In fact, at a first glance, you could even argue that an ideal country to move refugees into is Rwanda. Rwanda's economy has dramatically improved over the past few years. UNESCO has recently talked about the economic miracle of Rwanda, and I quote, "With an average growth rate of more than 7% per year since the year 2000, Rwanda is now one of the leading African countries in economic growth. According to official figures, its investments in agriculture, energy, infrastructure, mining and tourism have lifted more than 1 million people out of poverty." Some publications have gone as far as to call Rwanda the Singapore of Africa. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees also states that Rwanda has been welcoming refugees for over 2 decades. Rwanda generally provides a favourable protection environment. However, if we start to have a look at the situation in regards to freedom in the country, the picture is not necessarily as good. Rwanda is classed as not free in the research of Freedom House. Not only it's not free, but it also scores particularly low at 22 out of 100. The president of the country, Paul Kagame, has been in power for now over 2 decades. In the last election, the president has obtained 98.63% of the votes, which makes him either the most popular president that has ever existed in a democratic country, or suggests potential issues with how free and fair the elections have been. Reporters Without Borders classifies the country in 2021 as 156th out of 180. For context, the United Kingdom was classified 33rd. And this is without discussing in detail all the suspicious deaths and detentions enacted by the government. Where I find the most interesting observations on the country, however, is by looking at the statements made directly from the United Kingdom, its judiciary and officials, starting from its own government website, which at the time of the recording clearly states that LGBT individuals can experience discrimination and abuse, including from local authorities. In 2015, when, mind you, Rwanda was ruled by the very same president as today, a judge in London ruled against the extradition of 5 Rwandan men in their country, stating that there was a real risk they would not get a fair trial in Rwanda. Quoting directly from the Westminster Magistrate Court ruling, "From the evidence I heard and read, I have no doubt at all that the overall picture of Rwanda is of an authoritarian repressive state that is not less so than it was and is probably more so than in 2008-9. A state that is stifling opposition in a number of ways. There is evidence that the state is suspected of threatening and killing those it considers to be its opponents, or they simply disappear at home and abroad. There is evidence that suspects can be tortured in secret camps where basic human rights are ignored." In July last year, the United Kingdom's own International Ambassador for Human Rights, Rita French, expressed regret that Rwanda was not conducting transparent, credible and independent investigations into allegations of human rights violations, including deaths in custody and torture. Now, a point often raised when discussing refugees is the fact that the United Kingdom does not have the facilities and/or the capabilities to accommodate further population within its borders. And while it is undeniable that the UK is currently experiencing a major housing crisis and in general cost of living crisis, it's worth taking a look at how the country has been fulfilling the legal obligation it willfully took by helping to write and sign the Refugee Convention. If we take a look at the actual number of people the United Kingdom has given protection to, we can see the UK does not fare particularly well. And the numbers are not more reassuring if put into context of the current size of the country. I also think it's worth touching on the subject of economic migrants, as several MPs and media outlets have been describing refugees to the UK as economic migrants. Once again, when it comes to decide whether an asylum application is valid, the government own website tells us that almost 2/3 of the initial decisions made ending in September 2021 were grants of asylum, humanitarian protection or alternative forms of leave. And in cases where an appeal was submitted, on the appeals resolved in the year ending September 2021, almost half were allowed, meaning the applicant successfully overturned the initial decision. Finally, I think it's worth remembering the context in which this policy has been announced, with a Prime Minister just found to have broken the law. And I think it's also important remembering who is the person responsible for this policy.
Today, an independent investigation concluded otherwise, finding that her behaviour has been in breach of the ministerial code, with instances of bullying, including shouting and swearing.
Any senior person in any self-respecting workplace would have already been dismissed from the post the Home Secretary is occupying. One of the key aims of the new UK-Rwanda Partnership is to reduce channel crossings, and only time can tell if the policy will succeed in this. However, even if it does succeed in cutting the number of people we are protecting in the UK against life threats abroad, is this move still within the spirit of the Refugee Convention? Ultimately, in 1951, the UK was a signatory of the Refugee Convention, alongside 144 others, recognising the importance of providing safety to those expecting threats to their lives around the world, and priding itself on its welcoming nature to those in need. And the Prime Minister seems to agree with this. And while it is certain that policies are long overdue to address this issue, it is safe to say that the move to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda raises many uncomfortable questions.